This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Robin Reid, K-State Extension Farm Economist, and Jenny Ifft, K-State Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair, kick off today's show discussing ARC and PLC payment estimates for the recent crop marketing year. K-State Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator Lexie Hayes continues the show previewing the Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes and its opportunities for youth. Ending the show is K-State horticulture expert Matt McKernan as he explains the benefits of dividing iris and the steps involved. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our show discussing ARC and PLC payments with K-State Extension Farm Economist Robin Reid and K-State Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair Jenny Ifft. Robin, Jenny, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us, Shelby.
Great to be here.
As we're thinking about ARC and PLC, Robin, is there anything that's a little different specifically for this year?
Yeah, so it's kind of exciting this year in that we get the higher of the calculated agricultural risk coverage or ARC payment or the price loss coverage or PLC payment. You know, we've always had to choose between these two programs since the 2014 Farm Bill. But because of the timing of when the Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed last year, we had actually already made our elections for that crop year, and then the parameters changed because of that bill. So in that bill, it gave all the farmers the opportunity to have the higher of the two calculated payments. And that was for last year's harvested crop. But that is the payment coming this October. So there's always that delay in the payment where we have to get through that marketing year. Unfortunately, starting with this crop year, so 2026, we will be going back to making those annual elections between ARC and PLC. That timeline has not been announced yet, but we will be getting into that election period at some point for this year's crop.
I would just add the later that is for producers, the better, because the later it is, the more you're going to know about your yields in this year, and it's going to make that decision easier.
And something else producers have been working on that kind of relate to ARC and PLC, base acres. And when we think about everything related to ARC, PLC, and people's crops, what is that meaning?
Well, and that's really why the election period is delayed this year, is right now they're going through a base acre, opportunity to add more. I don't want to call it an update or a reallocation because that is not correct. It's different than what we've had in the past. In the Big Beautiful Bill Act, it was addressed that there's quite a few farmers out there that are planting more acres than they have in base acres. And so a correction has been made that we can add 30 million base acres nationally. So right now, FSA is going through each producer's planting history and seeing if they qualify for additional base acres. So that is the process going on right now, and then we'll get into the election period for this year's crop. But just to make that clear, that does not affect the payment we're getting this October. That will come into play with this year's crop, but that payment comes in October of 2027.
And looking at our crops in Kansas, Jenny, any trends we're seeing?
Well, 2025 was a good year for most crops. Not in all parts of the state. I'm not sure that could ever happen to Kansas. But generally, it was a good yield year, one of the best corn years in a while. There were some pockets, especially up in the Northwest, that had lower yields, that saw some insurance payments. But overall, 2025 was a good year for most producers.
When you look at the state map, do you see producers receiving more from ARC or PLC, even though they are getting the higher of the two?
I would say the starting point is PLC price loss coverage. So those effective reference prices of the PLC is guaranteed on are higher than the marketing year average prices, actual for wheat or forecast for other crops. So the starting point could be PLC, but you're going to get the higher of those two. And it's a little bit tricky this year when a producer might get ARC. So it was generally a year with good yields, except for a handful of counties across the state. However, your ARC guarantee is based on your benchmark yield. And so that is the Olympic average of the previous 5 years. So you drop the highest and the lowest and you take the average of that. So some areas like Northeast Kansas had, like say Northeast Kansas for corn, they've had some pretty good yields over the last decade. So their benchmark yield that their ARC guarantee is based on is quite high. So we are expecting high ARC payments to be higher than expected PLC payments. In some northeastern counties, they didn't necessarily have bad yields, but they might have had average yields, or even slightly above average yields. But just because that, ARC guarantee was based off a relatively high yield as well as a relatively high price, there are places that are where you'd expect to see ARC payments. Northeast Kansas is one of them. I'd say that's the case for both corn and soybeans. Where it might be looking, of course, I have to say go to agmanager.info or another place to see where, in some cases your ARC payment might be higher, especially for corn and soybeans. That's not the case for wheat and milo. And this is quite important because about half of all our base acres in Kansas are for wheat. So ARC and PLC payments are based off of what you have base and not what you grow. And for wheat and sorghum, those reference prices, so what that PLC guarantee is on, they're quite a bit higher than market prices. So with a very few exceptions, for wheat and milo, we're expecting PLC payments.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of interject and kind of explain those PLC payments, especially like Jenny said, for wheat and grain sorghum, because they are going to be very sizable this year. Yeah. Wheat, we already know the final price because that marketing year has ended. So that final price was $5.06. If you compare that to the effective reference price, that's $1.29 per bushel PLC payment. So how you calculate that for your own farm is you take that $1.29 per bushel times your program yield of your farm. Each farm has a program yield on file at the Farm Service Agency office. That does not change. So take that farm's program yield and then times 85% of your base acres in wheat for that farm. And that is your payment. So it's a pretty simple calculation, but I think producers are going to see it as a very sizable amount compared to what they've had in the past. And kind of the same on grain sorghum. That marketing year will end at the end of August. But we are pretty close to knowing that final price. Our estimate is pretty close. How that works is each month there's a survey done to elevators. How much grain did you sell and what did you pay for it? And so a lot of that is weighted based on after harvest or after the first of the year. So there's not a lot of grain left to sell in this marketing year. But right now our estimate on grain sorghum is $1.12 per bushel PLC payment. So again, take that times your program yield and 85% of your grain sorghum base acres, and that's a pretty sizable amount. Even when you look at the ARC County projections that we're putting out on grain sorghum, there's some counties that were projecting $100 per acre ARC or ARC payment, but the reality is PLC is likely going to be even higher than that, depending on your program yield.
We're seeing up to $90 an acre estimated for PLC sorghum in some counties. Now that is for your counties with a higher average program yield. If your average yields are lower, your program yields are lower, it's gonna reflect that.
Do you also have estimates for the other crops that aren't wheat and grain sorghum, Robin?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to talk through too, Shelby. So we have never had a PLC payment on soybeans since this started in the 2014 Farm Bill. This will be the year. And the reason for that is the Big Beautiful Bill Act did raise that reference price for soybeans. So right now it's $10.40 for the 2025 and 2026 crop. So that's projected at a 31 cent per bushel PLC payment on soybeans. So that's kind of with corn too, that's where you kind of have to look and say, is ARC going to be higher depending on your yields at the county level, like Jenny talked through. But 31 cents on soybeans per bushel is our projection, 27 cents on corn per bushel are the projected PLC payments. So payments and everything is kind of the story here.
Anything else do you recommend growers keep in mind as we look forward in the season?
Absolutely. So these payments are expected in early October. We're hoping there's not another government shutdown that throws a wrench in things, but they're going to come in early October, most likely, and that's a busy time for a lot of producers. You're in the thick of things with harvest. There's a lot going on, but it's also a time when you could be prepaying inputs, thinking about paying down debt, whatever your needs are. So it might be worth looking at what expected payments are for cash flow purposes. Producers can go to agmanager.info and see articles and maps of what expected payments are for their counties, as well as how to calculate it for your individual operation.
Jenny, Robin, I appreciate both taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And just specifically where to find those on Ag Manager. If you go under the Ag Policy section, there's estimated ARC and PLC payments. And while we've just talked Kansas today, those are actually available nationally and for a lot more commodities than we talked today. So go check it out and let Jenny and I know if you have any questions.
That was K-State Extension Farm Economist Robin Reid, and she was joined by K-State Flinchbaugh Agricultural Policy Chair Jenny Ifft as they discuss estimated payments for agricultural risk coverage and price loss coverage for the 2025-2026 marketing year. You can find more information on this by going to agmanager.info, or I will also link their publications in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the upcoming 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes with K-State Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator, Lexie Hayes. Lexie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shelby.
Lexie, for the 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes, a lot of different events within it, and wanting to talk through those today, and beginning with the 4-H Livestock Judging Contest, and what is this providing to the youth?
This provides them an opportunity to showcase their evaluation skills of the 4 main livestock species. So they'll be judging cattle, sheep, goats, and hogs, as well as practicing their communication skills by giving oral reasons on those classes.
Is this for all age divisions or only specific ones?
It is for any 4-H youth who are 9 and older. However, this is our state level contest that determines who goes to the national contest. So it's at a competitive level for those that we are preparing to represent Kansas at the national level.
And another one of those contests, meat judging. And what will kids be doing for this contest?
They will be evaluating carcasses and cuts of meat during that contest. It will be a little different this year because it will be hosted at the Stout Center, but our meats crew is doing a wonderful job of putting together a contest where they'll still have an opportunity to showcase what they know when it comes to identifying those retail ID cuts as well as evaluating carcasses.
And what's another contest involved in these sweepstakes?
The Skillathon is another contest that we host, and this is an opportunity for kids to showcase their knowledge on more of the application-based side of the livestock industry. So there's a variety of stations that the kids go through individually, and then there are also some team activities that they work through as a team. They're given a problem, and they figure out how to solve that problem as a group, and it could be anything related to the livestock industry. We also have the Quiz Bowl contest, which is similar to Academic Bowl, but it's all revolves around the livestock industry. And so those teams of 4, they actually have to test in on Friday morning to get into the head-to-head rounds. And then we put them in brackets and put them head-to-head on Sunday afternoon to showcase their knowledge and how quickly they can respond to those questions about the livestock industry.
For the Livestock Skillathon, you mentioned problems they have to solve. Do you have any examples of what it has been in the past?
Yeah, so we have some quality assurance questions where they're given a label or a product and they have to work through a quality assurance exercise. Sometimes there is a forage or hay class that they have to judge. We've had keep coal before. There have been other times that they've been given a reproductive scenario that they have to work through and help make management and marketing decisions for those animals.
And where are the different places these events are taking place? You mentioned the Stout Center for the meat judging contest.
We're really excited this year that we're going to get to host the kids in the new Bilberry Family Event Center that is north of campus. And so it'll be great to give the youth the opportunity to see that facility if they haven't already. It's a beautiful space and we're really excited to use it and invite our 4-H youth to be a part of the programs that we're hosting there in that new facility.
For people, if they are coming to the 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes and they win, what's the next step for them?
So for the livestock and meats contest, the top performing individuals actually have the opportunity to compete to be on Kansas's all-star team. And so kids from across the state are given the unique opportunity to work together to represent Kansas at the national contest. And then the teams who actually win are given the opportunity to go to other contests. For example, the American Royal, Exarban, Denver are all options they have to go as a team and represent Kansas. For the Skillathon and Quiz Bowl, those are local level based teams. And so the teams who win those contests will get to go to Louisville to represent Kansas at the National 4-H contest this fall.
Is the livestock and meat judging also in Louisville?
The National Livestock Judging Contest is hosted at Louisville as well. And then the National Meats Contest is actually hosted here at K-State as part of the American Royal.
Lexie, why is this event called a sweepstakes?
So in addition to the 4 state 4-H contests we're hosting, we encourage the kids to expand their horizons and be involved in all of the contests. And those who do decide to do that, they are eligible for the sweepstakes award. So individuals who participate in livestock judging, the senior division of meat judging, and Skillathon, those scores are all tabulated together and we have an overall sweepstakes winner. And then we also recognize the top 10 kids who perform to show they're versatile and they've expanded their horizons and can be successful in all those contests. And for teams, we have the same thing. If a county or a unit has a team in all of the contests, so that would be livestock judging, the senior division of meats, Skillathon, and then a quiz bowl team, they're eligible for the sweepstakes tabulation as well. And we recognize the top sweepstakes team who basically scores the highest in all of those contests when we combine their scores from all of the events of the weekend.
Who is eligible to be a part of the sweepstakes and what is that deadline for getting registered?
So any youth that are 9 and older that's interested in participating in any of the contests related to livestock sweepstakes should contact their local extension agent. The local office is responsible for submitting all of the entries for their local unit, and that deadline is August 1. So if you haven't heard about sweepstakes in your county or you're interested in going or want to know how to get to be part of the team, then you need to contact your local agent and they can get you plugged into the right place. Or if you're a solo person interested from your county, you can recruit a few friends and talk to your agent about getting you entered. And that deadline is coming up quick on August 1st. And so make sure that you are contacting your local extension agent.
And when are these sweepstakes taking place in Manhattan, Kansas?
They will be taking place August 22nd and 23rd of August.
Is there anything that youth, if they are coming to attend, could be doing to prepare for the events?
Absolutely. They could be practicing livestock judging, and there's lots of county fairs going on right now. And so watching the other shows even shows that they aren't participating in as a 4-H'er or maybe don't have that project, and listening to the judge and some of their evaluation and comments of those animals during the county fair. They can also be thinking critically at home about some of the equipment that they use, about the feed that they feed their animals for the Skillathon. And also they could just be looking up questions, random questions on the internet. This day and age, kids have lots of access to that information because all of them have a phone for the most part. And so they could be looking up questions, or if there's something they're curious about related to the livestock industry, they could look it up quickly. Another component of the Quiz Bowl is current events. So just being aware of things that are happening in the livestock industry is something that's really important to being successful in these contests.
If people are wanting to find out more information, how can they do that?
They can, again, contact their local extension office, or they can visit our website. It's actually easiest, probably if they just Google Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes, and we have a page dedicated to the event that has all the rules as well as some resources that counties and teams can use to help prepare for the event.
Lexie, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
That was Kansas State University Extension Assistant and Youth Livestock Program Coordinator Lexie Hayes discussing the Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes, which is taking place August 22nd and the 23rd in Manhattan, Kansas. The deadline to get entered for this event is August 1st and does need to be done online through your local extension unit. If you're wanting to find out more information about the 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes, there are a few different ways you can do so. I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. You can also do what Lexie suggested, which is simply searching for Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes online. Once again, that is searching for Kansas 4-H Livestock Sweepstakes online, or you can also navigate to it by going to the K-State Animal Sciences and Industry website, which is asi.k-state.edu. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey as they discuss what USDA's latest crop progress report revealed, as the growing season has now entered the later half of July.
We did have an interesting week with a lot of rain in parts of the South, but really a relatively dry week, northern and central plains through the Midwest and into the Northeast.
Put it all together, and USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey presents the highlights from the latest crop progress report as of July 19th.
And it continues to show most crops developing at or ahead of their normal pace for this time of year.
Some of the specifics from the latest report include
corn crop silking very quickly advancing during the week. Soybeans blooming almost 2/3 of the crop, blooming nationally by July 19th. 5-year average 60%. Last year at this time 60%. We are approaching the halfway mark on rice heading, well ahead of the 5-year average. We are reaching near the end of the winter wheat harvest, except in the north.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Once again, that was USDA's Rod Bain and USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey. If you're wanting to hear more about the grain market, on Fridays on Agriculture Today, we're always joined by K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien as he gives his grain market outlook. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. Iris is one of the most popular perennial plants in the home landscape. While they're relatively low maintenance, they do need to be divided about every 3 to 5 years. K-State Extension horticulture expert Matt McKernan explains the benefits of dividing iris.
With dividing, what we're essentially trying to do is to reinvigorate the plant. And so some of the clues that we would look for that maybe our iris need dividing is it's going to be probably overcrowded. You're going to see a lot of growth in a small area. And typically what that does is it then reduces the number of flowers that you would see in the spring. So if this past spring your iris didn't bloom well, that's typically a good indication that your iris is going to need dividing. As a general rule of thumb, if you think back and in the last 5 years haven't divided your iris, doing so now is really going to be a good opportunity to reinvigorate those plants and really maybe increase the number of blooms in years to come.
So what's the process then? How do we do this so that we're not causing damage?
Yes, so with iris, we really want to make sure we wait until the iris is done blooming and kind of goes dormant in the late summer months. Typically that's mid-July through early August for most of the state of Kansas. This is the point in the time when we can dig up the iris and divide them without impacting the number of blooms that it's going to have in the following spring. We can also divide iris in the early spring, but typically we sacrifice that spring's flowers when we do so. And if we don't wait until kind of late July, early August, and we divide them right after they finish blooming, we can also minimize the number of flowers the next spring.
So we're digging up the whole plant to begin with.
Yes, so ideally when we're dividing iris, you want to dig up the entire plant. Iris grow from rhizomes, or basically these enlarged stems that grow just below or at the soil surface, so they're very easy to dig. You don't have to go very deep. But iris do have roots that come 6 to 8 inches off of those rhizomes, so we want to dig about a foot down all the way around the plant. Once we get it dug up, we want to shake off that existing soil so that we can really inspect the roots and the rhizomes. And ideally what we're looking for is healthy rhizomes towards the outer portion of the plant. Those rhizomes that we're looking for are going to be at least the width of your thumb and firm in feel. They are typically going to have roots that come down from the bottom side of that rhizome. And on the upper side of that rhizome, they're going to have a fan of leaves that kind of fans out on the top side. Those are the portion of the iris plant that we're looking to save. Often there's going to be sections or links of old rhizome that have no roots, that might be mushy. Those are typically the ones that we want to break off or cut off with scissors or a knife and really just discard and compost. That's really not going to be helpful in the regrowth of the iris. It's those new firm sections of the rhizome that have both leaves and roots that we want to prioritize replanting.
And we're going to replant right away?
Yeah. Typically when we're replanting, we want to, first of all, trim the leaves back of our iris. Ideally, we want to cut those leaves down to about 8 inches tall. That's going to help the iris from being blown all around when we try to replant them. And it's also going to help make sure that the water that we apply doesn't pool up in weird ways around the plant as well. So once we've got the iris ready to be replanted, we want to prepare that soil, remove any of the weeds in the area, and maybe mix in some fertilizer. The best way to add fertilizer is based on the recommendations of a soil test. But if you're out of time and don't have a soil test result in front of you, ideally we would just use a balanced fertilizer, something that's equal parts nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, like a 10-10-10 fertilizer. And we'd apply that at about 1 pound of fertilizer per 100 square feet of iris flower bed. We'd want to mix that about 6 inches deep, and loosening up that soil then really makes it super easy to put those rhizomes back down on the ground. We're going to dig really a shallow hole, just enough so that we can lay the roots in the soil. But the rhizome itself, we want to leave at least half or more exposed above the soil surface. It's important that we don't bury that rhizome too deep, because that's really going to lead to rot and other problems with our iris. So ideally, we're going to space these new plants about 12 to 18 inches apart. Most people will plant iris in a circular pattern. They'll use either odd numbers like 3 or 5 iris plants, and they'll plant them in a circle. You'll put the cut end of the rhizome towards the center of the circle and that fan of leaves towards the exterior of the circle. And that'll be the direction that the iris grows in the future. So there'll be plenty of space for those iris to continue to regrow and provide you those beautiful blooms for years to come.
That's K-State Extension horticulture expert Matt McKernan with information on how to divide iris. To learn more, contact your local K-State Extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.